after 400 years in Egypt, and then 40 years in the wilderness, the time had finally come for God's people to inherit the land that he promised to them. Except there's a little problem. There's already other people living there. So what happens in this story? Why does it happen? And how do we reconcile God's goodness with a bunch of people becoming homeless? Or maybe even worse. Let's dive in. It's really easy to read the accounts of the battles that we find in the book of Joshua and assume that the Israelites are literally committing genocide against a large population of innocent civilians. Because in places like Joshua 11, it describes things like how the Israelites utterly destroyed these enemy armies, how they showed no mercy and did not spare anyone who could breathe. Pause. How could God condone such behavior? To understand God's actions, we need to address 3 questions. Here we go. Question number 1. Who's who in the book of Joshua? Who's who? Well, there are 2 sides in the battles that we read in Joshua. There's the Israelites and the Canaanites. And Israel is a group of former slaves who have been wandering in the desert for the last 40 years. And Canaan is an empire full of walled cities, horse-drawn chariots, and trained soldiers. They have a thriving economy and established alliances with each other. So what I need you to picture is that this would be like my 4th grade soccer team taking on the US women's national team who won the World Cup a couple years ago. This isn't the story of the strong pushing around the weak. It's a story of God using a band of slaves to bring down an evil empire. Question number 2. What's really going on in the book of Joshua? Remember, Joshua 11 described things like how the Israelites utterly destroyed armies, showing no mercy, not sparing anyone who could breathe. But there's a problem. If we go just a little bit further in the biblical story, we see that those same enemies that they fought in Joshua 11 show up again and cause more trouble. How could that be possible if they were completely destroyed? Great question. This is why it's so important for us to remember that the Bible is meant to be read literally and not just literally. The book of Joshua uses language of ancient warfare, which everyone in Joshua's day would have actually understood. This type of communication is full of big exaggerations. Think about this. Think about when your favorite team beats their rivals in an intense game. When someone asks you how the game went, you might say something like, "It was an absolute massacre. The other team didn't even stand a chance. We wiped the floor with them." And this is exactly what many historians and scholars believe is taking place throughout the book of Joshua. So that's question number 2. Let's move on to question number 3. Why is all of this happening? Well, hundreds of years before this group of former slaves went to war against Canaan, Abraham was actually living in Canaan. God told him that his family was going to spend hundreds of years in Egypt. He said this, "In the 4th generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure." What is God saying? God was telling Abraham that his grandkids would be stuck in Egypt, all because God wanted to be patient with Canaan. The Amorites were the founders of Babylon, and it was this city that was famous for violently conquering their neighbors and stomping all over the poor and marginalized in their communities. Canaan was a land that had given itself over to the corruption of sin. The promised land had become so defiled by idolatry and infested with injustice that the people living there had actually made child sacrifices a part of their normal routine. Archaeologists have uncovered graveyards that contain the remains of thousands of infant corpses that had been offered to the Canaanites' bloodthirsty false gods. This was the sin of the Amorites. And for hundreds of years, God was patient with them. He gave them hundreds of years to stop what they were doing, repent of their sins, and choose a different way. But eventually the time had come for justice. And God's method of justice was to use this wandering band of liberated people to bring down a bloodthirsty empire that had been built on the backs of slaves and child sacrifices. So what's happening in this story? Well, what's happening in this story is God is being exactly who he said he is. Exodus 34 tells us that the Lord is compassionate and gracious. He is slow to anger and abounding in love and faithfulness. He maintains his love to thousands of generations, forgiving wickedness and rebellion and sin. But yet, he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sins of the parents to the third and fourth generation. See, the taking of the promised land reminds us that while all of this was going on, all of the crappy and hurtful and harmful things that happen in our world, God is patient. But he's not going to delay forever. Someday, he will return to deal with sin and evil once and for all. Someday, justice will reign, and that all is right in the world kind of peace will be restored. So what should you do with all of that? You should trust God's character and follow his lead. Go where he calls you to go. Let him work in and through you. Partner with him to start putting the world back together. And a great place to start would be by being patient with other people, just like God is patient with us. If you want to learn more about this story, check out this week's message, which was part of our series, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And if you want to take an even deeper dive, you could start reading the Bible plan that's called Fully Devoted Israel Part 1. We will go ahead and put the link to that plan in the description of this video. Until then, stay nerdy.